In my last life, my sister and I both married into one of the most powerful families in America, the Whitmores. They had 2 sons. The older one was Damon Whitmore. On the surface, he was the perfect Manhattan gentleman. Polite, generous, always smiling, always saying things that made people feel seen, but there was always a shadow in Damon's eyes. He didn't look at people like they were human. He looked at them like objects on a shelf, weighing how he could use them for his own entertainment. The younger one was Julian Whitmore, the complete opposite. Julian was so cold that standing next to him felt like the temperature dropped. He lived like someone outside the glittery world, into meditation, wearing a mala bracelet around his wrist. For a while, he'd even stayed at a meditation retreat in Northern California. In high society, people said Julian didn't know how to love, and that made him both terrifying and strangely safe. In my last life, my sister Claire hated Damon. She said Damon was paranoid, dark, suffocating. She chose Julian because he looked clean, because his eyes were distant like women didn't tempt him, because the spiritual man reputation made her believe he'd respect her. But she was wrong. Claire couldn't stand the loneliness of a marriage where her husband didn't need her laughter at all. She cheated, hiding it behind parties and girls' trips. When Julian found out, he didn't explode the way Damon would have. He was calm in a way that made your skin crawl. Julian used his own mala beads to tie Claire's wrists. Each cold wooden bead dug into her skin like a sentence being handed down. He kept her locked in a room for 3 days. No hitting, no yelling, just making her listen to the soft clicking of the beads in the dark. Then on the 4th day, Julian dragged her out of the house and threw her into the hands of a group of infamous rich men, the kind who treated other people's humiliation like entertainment. After that, Claire vanished from every party, like her name had been erased from every guest list. And me, I married Damon. That was what really drove Claire insane. Because in that life, I lived like a queen. I managed the trust fund, controlled the books, held the entire cash flow of Whitmore Holdings in my hands. Damon could party, sneak around, turn his nights into his own private swamp, and he'd still have to smile at me. He'd still have to put his arm around me in front of the press like a devoted husband. I held the financial keys, and Damon knew it. If I turned the key, his whole world would collapse. Claire couldn't stand watching me up there while Julian destroyed her. In a fit of rage, she shoved me off a balcony of a high-rise in Midtown. I felt like a flower torn apart by winter wind, the air screaming in my ears, my life cracking apart before I hit the ground. Then I opened my eyes. Not in a hospital, not in hell, but in a glittering ballroom under crystal chandeliers, champagne in the air, violins playing, and fake congratulations spilling from every mouth. The engagement party. The day everything started. I stood in the center of a Hampton mansion, wearing a white dress that hugged my waist, my hands ice cold even though the room felt like spring. In front of me were the Whitmore brothers. Damon was smiling, Julian was silent, and beside me, Claire was standing there too. Her eyes cut into me like blades. I understood instantly. She came back too. Claire's smile was stretched almost painfully tight, but her voice was sweet as honey. She suddenly turned, grabbed my hand, and shoved me straight toward Julian. "Grace." She said my new name like we were close. "Julian's had his eye on you for a long time. He's not marrying anyone else but you." A wave of whispers rolled through the room. Women in gowns turned their heads. Men in tailored suits lifted their glasses, eyes sparkling with curiosity. Claire tilted her head and smiled like an angel, but her eyes were burning with victory. "Don't be shy." She leaned in, whispering so only I could hear. "Call him your husband. Now." Then she shoved harder. I lost my balance and reached out, instinctively searching for the edge of a table. But before my fingers could touch the cold wood, an arm hooked around me and held me steady, solid as steel. A faint scent of sandalwood. Not warm, not sweet. Just clean and cold, like winter air passing over skin. "Julian." He held me for exactly 1 heartbeat, then let go like he didn't want to get dust on him. Julian's eyes slid over me, not the way a man looks at a woman, more like the way someone reads a page, deciding whether the words are real or fake. "Careful, Miss Grace." His voice was low, even emotionless. "The floor is slippery." It sounded like basic politeness. But at the end of the sentence, something sharp hid underneath like a blade tucked into velvet. So that was the spiritual man of high society. Cold, beautiful, untouchable. If I hadn't seen him tie Claire up with mala beads, if I hadn't seen the cruel curve of his smile when he handed her over to those men, maybe I would have believed Julian was actually a saint. I lowered my head so my lashes would hide my eyes. I forced myself to breathe evenly and swallowed my caution. Thank you, Julian. Powerful men are sensitive to resistance. One flash of disgust, one hint of fear, and they get suspicious. And once they're suspicious, the days ahead turn into a battlefield. I wasn't stupid enough to set myself on fire right at the front door. I lifted my gaze just enough to meet Claire's eyes. In her eyes, victory burst like fireworks. Claire thought she'd just thrown me into hell. She thought she'd stolen heaven. She thought Julian was the devil, and Damon was salvation. I almost laughed. Because if Julian was a cold wolf, Damon was a venomous snake. Smooth, slippery. The kind that could pretend to be a rose right before it sank its teeth into your throat. In my last life, Damon was only good to me because I locked down his money. If I hadn't had power, he would have turned me into a pretty ornament. Or worse, a sacrifice for the filthy parties he loved. The Whitmores had secrets that never made the headlines. And Damon was the deepest pit of all. Claire straightened her posture and instantly switched her face into gentle, proper sweetness. She turned to the room, speaking loudly enough for everyone to hear. My little sister has always been shy. Claire smiled, her perfect red lips curving. I've looked after her since we were kids, so I know she needs a man who can protect her. Julian is refined, steady and spiritually grounded. I think she'll be happy. Then she looked back at me like she was handing out a blessing. Grace, your dream finally came true. Treasure your new husband. She emphasized every word like she was hammering nails into wood. People laughed politely. Some nodded, praising Claire for being such a good sister. Some looked at me with pity because everyone had heard Julian didn't do tenderness. But Damon was different. Damon looked at Claire like she was a gift that had walked itself to him, tied its own ribbon, and dropped into his hands. He smiled, bright and flawless. The kind of smile that never had a bad angle on camera. Claire, you really are a thoughtful sister, Damon said, voice warm like whiskey. It's rare to see a woman who truly thinks about the family the way you do. Claire tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, soft and practiced, like she was in an old movie. She knew she was beautiful, and she knew men liked seeing beauty that obeyed. Damon held out his hand. Would you give me the honor of the first dance tonight? Claire barely hesitated. This was the world she loved most. The lights, the music, the room watching her. She placed her hand in Damon's like she was stepping onto a throne. The music started. They spun across the floor like a fated couple. Applause erupted when the dance ended. Every eye followed Claire. She soaked in admiration, in the sweet feeling of victory she thought she'd taken back from me. But I saw something else. I saw Damon's eyes when he leaned down to whisper in her ear, lit with a strange kind of thrill, like he'd just found prey that came willingly. Any woman with experience knows this. The more dangerous a man is, the longer you keep him hungry. You stretch the distance so he imagines, so he values, so he fears losing. But Claire was too eager. She was terrified I'd steal Damon back in a single night. She was terrified everything would slip away. So she clung to Damon like he was her last life raft, not realizing there were sharks under the water. That night, after the engagement party ended, Claire left the mansion with Damon, got in his car, and went straight to a luxury hotel in Manhattan, the kind where even the hallway lights smelled like money. I stood on the front steps, Hampton sea wind whipping cold across my shoulders, watching the taillights disappear, feeling strangely calm. Beside me, Julian still stood there, like a statue. You're not surprised? Julian asked suddenly. I turned and caught his gaze. He looked at me like he knew, like he was waiting to see if I'd panic, beg, fight. But I only smiled softly, the way a good girl smiles when she's been arranged like furniture, and doesn't dare rebel. I am, I said. But I think, sometimes fate knows what's best. Julian didn't answer. He just shifted his wrist slightly. The mala beads clicked together, quiet and small, like the sound of a lock turning. The next morning, While I was still in the living room of the mansion, my phone buzzed. A video call. Caller ID, Claire. I answered. Her face filled the screen. Red lips, bright eyes. Hair a little messy like she hadn't slept. She was wearing a thin silk camisole. And around her neck, a massive sapphire necklace, dark blue like deep water. Claire smiled, glowing like a child who'd just stolen the most precious thing in the world. Grace. She dragged out my name. See? I told you. Damon. Belongs to me. She lifted her chin so the sapphire caught the light, flashing like a declaration of war. I looked at her through the screen so calm I almost scared myself. I only curved my lips slightly, like I was watching someone step into a locked room and still think they just opened the gates of heaven. My dear sister, I said slowly. Let me guess. How long you think you're going to survive? The screen shook a little because Claire's hand was trembling with victory. Faint red marks showed along her collarbone, and she didn't need to explain them. She tilted her head back, showing off the sapphire like deep water. Grace, isn't it gorgeous? She stroked the pendant like it was a trophy. Auction piece. The kind normal people only dare stare at through glass. Damon gave it to me. A real man knows how to be generous and gentle. She paused, then remembered what mattered most and raised her voice. Either way, I'm walking into the Whitmore family as the future Mrs. Whitmore. You know their tradition. The older brother gets everything. I'll be the future lady of Whitmore Holdings. And you'll just live off dividends, or whatever little gifts Julian tosses you to keep you quiet. Claire pressed her lips together, eyes flashing with cruel satisfaction. You were born 3 minutes after me, but your whole life you loved looking down your nose at me. Well, can you see it now? Even in marriage, I win. I stared at the sapphire on her throat, and suddenly it looked like a drop of ocean frozen solid, cold and beautiful. But it wouldn't save anyone from drowning. I let out a soft laugh, my voice light as wind against curtains. Claire, don't you think you're celebrating a little too early? Her smile faltered. I kept my tone calm, like I was stating something obvious. Who in Manhattan doesn't know Damon Whitmore always has a whole orbit of women around him? After you marry him, you'll have to learn how to smile at girls who are always convinced they understand him better than his wife does. You'll be drowning in fake congratulations, hugs that last too long, looks sharp as needles. Number 3. Number 4. Number 5. They'll keep you up at night. Claire lifted her chin instantly, like standing taller could crush reality. That's the past, she said firmly. Last night he swore. He said from now on I'm the only woman. He even swore, if he ever betrays me, he'll pay for it for the rest of his life. She scoffed like I had no right to doubt her. He said before marriage, what man doesn't have fun? A rich, handsome man like him. Of course women chase him. But after the wedding it's different. He'll belong to me. Soon he'll be obsessed with me. I almost laughed out loud. A man's vows, especially a man who lives behind the windowless doors of high society, usually last about as long as a glass of champagne left outside on a balcony. I tilted my head and played innocent. You're that confident? Claire smiled even brighter. Like confidence was armor. Of course. There's never been a man I couldn't get. She leaned closer to the camera, sweet but icy. Listen, Grace. Damon is about to be my husband. You'd better stay away from him. If I catch you trying anything stupid, I'll make sure you never walk normally again. I didn't doubt she meant it, because in my last life, Claire had shoved me off that balcony, and her eyes back then were shining exactly like this. The eyes of someone who believed she'd fixed the order of the universe. I didn't say more. I didn't mention what I knew. I didn't mention the secrets I once used to keep Damon in his place. Some truths, said too early, only teach your enemy how to hide better. I just smiled, gentle and harmless. Congrats. Then I hung up and let Claire get drunk on the sound of her own pride cracking. In the weeks after that, Claire's social media turned into a love stage. Hand-holding photos, waist-grabbing stories, captions about being so happy she didn't even need sleep. Every post carried the same hidden message. I'm winning. I'm in the spotlight. I'm the center. Me. I chose a different way to win. I posted the gifts Julian sent. Not loud, not cheesy, not desperate. Just the kind of things nobody could deny. Value, power, freedom. A vintage watch bought at a private auction in New York. A small painting with a signature only real collectors would recognize. A set of pure white jewelry in a velvet box. No price tag needed. Because anyone who knew the price would feel their throat tighten. I didn't post kissing photos. I posted my hand resting on the paperwork for a newly opened trust account, with one simple caption. Peace looks good on me. The post shot straight onto trending. Comments exploded. People called me independent, mysterious, beautiful in a way that didn't need a man to shine. My engagement spiked past Claire's, and that drove her crazier than any insult ever could. Claire left a comment under my post, like a sweet, poisonous stab. Material things are just stuff in the end. The greatest gift in life is love. I replied instantly, without hesitation. Love usually likes to dress itself up as gifts. My fiancé just sent me something that makes me feel safer than any vow ever could. If you don't have it, don't take it personally. I didn't say what it was, but Claire understood it in the way that scared her most. She video called me, screaming, cursing, dragging the past and the future out just to stomp on them. I checked my watch, then hung up again like closing the door on a storm and letting it slam into the walls by itself. A few days later, Claire and Damon's wedding invitation arrived. A true no-budget limit production. The venue was a private island off the Florida Keys. Guests flew in on private jets and docked on yachts. The media circled the edge like starving fish, waiting for one crack so they could rush in and bite. Claire showed up in a wedding dress that sparkled like a galaxy, gripping Damon's arm as she worked the crowd, table to table, raising her glass. Her smile had to hurt by now, but she kept smiling because she believed every admiring look was another brick in her throne. And Damon? He acted like he deserved an award. His arm stayed wrapped around Claire's waist. He shielded her drink from other hands. Now and then he leaned down and pinched her cheek like some doting husband. Anyone watching would have sworn they were soulmates. Anyone except me. I stood near the flower arrangements, watching Damon through the soft gold light. I saw how his eyes moved fast and smooth. A quick glance toward the table on the left, where a woman in a black dress stared back without blinking. A flick of his mouth toward the bar, where a random guest just happened to be waiting the second Damon turned his head. A split-second eye contact so brief nobody else would catch it, yet long enough for two people with a shared secret to understand the secret was still alive. Claire didn't see any of it. She was drunk on winning. So drunk she started bragging the second Damon stepped away for a few minutes. When Damon disappeared into the changing room, Claire turned to me and held up her hand to show off a massive pink diamond ring. Grace. Her voice was sweet, but poisonous. Isn't it gorgeous? Rare. One of a kind. She smiled like she'd ground me under her heel. Not to be rude, but the stuff you post? It's tiny. Compared to this, it's basically toys. I picked up a small dessert, took a polite bite, then dabbed my lips with a napkin. At least those little things are mine. I met her eyes and smiled. But tell me something, Claire. That ring. Is it really yours? Claire's smile shut off like someone flipped a switch. Because everyone in that world knew Damon was rich. Sure, but not the kind of rich who could throw away insane numbers without someone backing him. And Claire had nothing but ambition and a wedding dress. She opened her mouth to snap back, but my phone buzzed. A text. From Julian. Just one line, cold as a blade laid against a throat. Watch them closely. Tonight, someone's going to lose what they think belongs to them. I looked up. Across the distance, Damon was walking back out, adjusting his cufflinks, his smile still flawless. But his eyes skimmed over me once quick, deep, and in that second, I knew. Tonight's show was about to change scenes. And this time, the one holding the strings wasn't Claire. It wasn't Damon. It was me. And Julian. I set my plate down and turned back to my sister, my voice soft as a blessing. Enjoy it. This island is beautiful. Because this might be the last time you ever see it. The way you want to. The truth was, that ring had never really belonged to Damon. It belonged to the Whitmore family collection kept in the Trust Council's vault like a crown jewel. If Damon wanted to wear any piece, he had to sign paperwork. Someone logged the serial number. Someone inspected the stone's condition. And after the event, it went right back to the exact slot, like returning a museum display. I'd only asked one question, But it hit the nerve Claire kept buried deepest. Is that ring really yours? Her face tightened just for one breath. Then she laughed, too loud, too hard, like laughter could cover the crack that had just appeared. Of course it's mine, Claire said, sharper now. What, you think it belongs to you? Her eyes darted around the island wedding, yanking attention back to the luxury like a drowning person grabbing a float. Look around. Claire lifted her chin, sweeping her gaze over couture gowns, limited edition watches, and handshakes with names that showed up in headlines. Everyone here matters. They came to celebrate me and Damon. And your wedding with Julian? She curled her mouth into fake pity. It'll never be anything like this. Then she tightened her grip and lowered her voice like she was issuing an order. And I'm warning you, stay away from my husband. I set my plate down, calm, like I'd just been told to stay away from a broken appliance. I tossed my fork into the trash beside the bar, looked back at her, and smiled. Relax, Claire. I'm not interested in trash. Claire tried to keep going, but the music swelled and the crowd erupted over fireworks bursting over the ocean. The stage she loved dragged her away, and I stayed where I was, watching the sparks fall like meteor rain, my mind sharp and cold. Claire wasn't wrong about one thing. My wedding to Julian wasn't extravagant. It barely even looked like a wedding. We picked a clear day in New York, went to the Manhattan Marriage Bureau, and signed our names in front of a clerk holding a stamp like it was power. No media, no gown, no long vows. Julian stood beside me in a plain white shirt, his mala still on his wrist. He signed his name like he was signing a contract, his expression never changing. Done. That same day, he took me to a high-end real estate office on Fifth Avenue, where new paper and money mixed in the air like something violent. He signed again, then slid a folder toward me. A mansion worth billions put in my name. Julian said it flatly, like he was rewarding a well-trained animal. You behaved. He looked at me, his mouth not moving much. You earned a reward. His generosity made even the richest people cautious. Even when I controlled the company's cash flow, I didn't spend like that. Julian did. He tossed numbers around the way people toss sand into the ocean. Then he said the classic line of a man used to giving orders, not explanations. I'm busy. I don't have time to entertain you. Julian walked out like he was leaving a meeting. Don't bother me unless it matters. If I need you, I'll come find you. Don't argue with my parents in front of me. And, he paused. Don't see other men. Then he left. A dream husband to a lot of women, so rich he could be absent, and so absent he accidentally gave me absolute freedom. Sounds like winning the lottery. But I didn't crawl back from death to become a crystal vase on a shelf. Wealth without power is just a pretty necklace. Put it on, and it can still be ripped right off your throat. I wanted higher. I wanted an empire nobody could shove off a balcony ever again. So I started building my empire like someone who'd seen the future in a long, cold dream. First came the stock market. I got in at the right moment. Got out at the right moment like I could hear Wall Street's heartbeat. My account ballooned so fast, the bank called to verify the transactions. Next was real estate. I bid on land, not based on feelings but based on where hospitals, schools, corporate headquarters, and new transit lines were moving. I bought what people hadn't realized was gold yet. I collected art and rare jewelry, not to show off, but because those were safe assets, the secret language of the elite. Some doors only open when you place the right object on the table. Finally, I invested in media and influencer networks. I didn't just want money. I wanted a voice. I wanted a single sentence from me to move markets, tilt public opinion, and make enemies think twice before they touched me. With the advantage of knowing the waves before they hit, every step I took felt like walking up stairs already built. 10 days later, Julian came back unexpectedly. Not the cold return from the last life, where he vanished into retreats and left his new wife behind. This time, he was almost polite. He invited me to dinner in a quiet room of the mansion, warm gold light spilling like honey. He made tea with his own hands, slow and exact, like a ritual. Then he set the cup in front of me and looked straight at me. Grace. His voice was calm in a way you couldn't read. We've been married 10 days. And you've spent over $100 million. I didn't flinch. I lifted the cup and took a sip. Even the tea was so high-end it smelled like it had a soul, light, but lingering. I smiled. Your black card has a 10 million a day limit. I said it like a cute complaint. Otherwise I would have spent more. For the first time, Julian's mouth curved, not polite, but amused, like he'd spotted a rare animal. You're not afraid I'll call you wasteful? I set the cup down, leaned back, and dropped the line at the perfect timing. The perfect dosage, like tossing bait into deep water. Only useless men complain about women spending money. I looked at him without blinking. And you, Julian, aren't that kind of man. If I wanted a star from the sky, you could pull it down for me, couldn't you? I paused, then added the final hit, soft as velvet, sharp as steel. Besides, what I spent is an investment. It'll multiply. And we're married now. What's yours is mine, and what's mine? I smiled. Makes you look good too. No powerful man can resist praise that makes him feel honored and benefits him at the same time. Sure enough, something flickered in Julian's eyes, interest. He poured me more tea, his voice dropping like it was just for me. You're different from the women I've met, he said. They're satisfied with handbags and necklaces. You make waves in the market. Marrying me. He tilted his head. Does it feel like settling? I let out a small laugh. Not at all, I said. You just have resources. Without them, I couldn't move this fast. That was true. I was bold because I knew Julian was rich enough to absorb any shock. Profits, legally, could count as marital assets. But the reputation I built, the network I held, the influence I created, those would always be mine. One day, when I stood high enough, people wouldn't say Julian Whitmore's wife. They'd say, Julian Whitmore, Grace's husband. Julian didn't dance around it. You can invest, start companies, do whatever you want, he said. If you need capital, connections, resources, ask. Then he set his cup down, his eyes sharpening just a bit. But I'm here today for a friend. He wants to buy that land south of the suburbs. He's building a mall. Name your price. I kept smiling and nodded like it was nothing. Family, right? I said softly. Your friend is my friend. Why talk money? I'll have my people send the paperwork tomorrow. Julian's cup froze midair. Because that land was the land I bought right after we got married. I'd sold the mansion he gave me, added my stock market winnings, and poured it all into that plot. If I sold it now, I'd make at least 4 times back. But I just offered to hand it over for free. Julian stared at me for a long time. I knew he was weighing me the way he weighed gold. Finally he asked, blunt and clean. What do you want? Thank. I kept my face serious and said a sentence that sounded meaningless yet hit like a needle. Isn't it obvious? I said. Because I like you. For the first time in his life, Julian got cornered by something that simple. His mouth curved again, this time into a strange smile, almost boyish, like he'd just discovered a new game. Funny. He lifted one brow. You think I believe that? I didn't look away. I told the truth the way a smart person tells truth, using the safe part to hide the dangerous part. You met my parents, I said. You know how opportunistic and selfish they are. No matter who I married, they'd sell me for power and resources. You're the best option. I tilted my head, gentle, like I was discussing a deal that benefited both sides. You like quiet and distance. I like business and money. We're partners. I smiled. We both win. In Julian's eyes, something bright flickered, too clear to trust. His whole life he'd been trained to stand behind Damon, to stay humble, to not shine. And I walked straight into the light, my ambition uncovered, my decisiveness unapologetic. I was what he'd never been allowed to become. And maybe, what he never expected he'd want. Julian set his cup down and looked at me like a chessboard just opened. Fine, he said. From now on, you go with me. Not long after, he started bringing me to private gatherings with his inner circle. Closed rooms. Silent handshakes. Deals that never hit the news. People who could shift a city's direction with one sentence. I walked in wearing my gentlest smile. And inside, one thought rang perfectly clear. Tonight, Claire was on that island, clinging to Damon like she was holding victory. But she didn't know that across the water, Julian was walking me into the real game. And the match had only just begun. If Damon's upper circle was just a pack of trust fund boys swapping girlfriends faster than watches, Julian's circle was something else entirely. No loud laughter from spoiled children. Just short handshakes, measuring eyes, and people whose calendars had to be booked months out just for dinner. These were real power brokers. The kind who didn't need headlines to shake an industry with a phone call. Julian led me into that world like opening a hidden door behind the glossy Whitmore wall. And me, with the advantage of someone who'd already died once and returned to the starting line, knew exactly when to speak, when to stay silent, when to drop just enough information to make them see me differently. I didn't try to impress with sparkle. I impressed with precision. After only a few meetings, I wasn't just Julian's wife sitting there as decoration. People started saying my name, asking my opinion, pulling me into conversations women usually weren't allowed to hear. Then one day, someone invited me for tea at a penthouse overlooking Central Park, where it was so quiet you could hear an expensive clock ticking. And I learned one simple truth: powerful men admire strength in women just as much as women admire strength in men. If you're strong enough to earn respect, they'll open the road themselves. Julian's attitude toward me shifted because of it. He started pouring tea for me not as manners but as habit. He remembered I liked desserts with less sugar. He remembered I hated heavy perfume at dinner. He even negotiated office leases for my incubator project, picking the building with the best infrastructure, the best security, and a price tag expensive enough to stop people from looking down on me. He personally pulled a few top names into my orbit. This one. That one. Julian said, calm. Pick. His attention got so detailed that sometimes I caught myself wondering, which lifetime's Julian was this? And then, on the opening day of my influencer incubator program, Claire also succeeded in the way she loved most. She buttered up Damon's mother well enough to get rewarded. The family council gave Claire control over Whitmore Holdings' hotel and jewelry divisions. The press went wild. Headlines exploded with praise. The ideal wife, graceful, ambitious, capable. But inside that family, fairness was always a velvet-wrapped blade. Because Claire and I were both Whitmore daughters-in-law, they had to give me something too. They gave me the worst division. Fashion. A department considered the company's black hole. Money poured in and never came back out. Designers came and went and nothing changed. Over 5 years they burned through more than 50 creative directors, local, international, geniuses, celebrities, and all they left behind were collections people laughed at. People in the industry called it the most beautiful failure in Whitmore history. Handing me that division was basically them pushing my head under the mud, then calling it incompetence when I drowned. Julian frowned, one of the rare times he showed real irritation. Travel is booming, he said. I'll talk to them. I'll get you something else. I waved it off, smiling like it was nothing. No, I said. I like flipping the board when everything's stacked against me. I looked him straight in the eye. 1 month. Just give me 1 month. Watch. The corner of Julian's mouth lifted slightly. Something like admiration flashed in his eyes. I nodded, calm but solid as a nail driven into wood. There are industries I won't gamble on. But bringing this fashion brand back? I let out a small smile. I've done it once already. In my last life, that achievement was the one thing that made even the strictest people in the family shut up and admit I was real. But this time, I didn't want to stop at saving it. I wanted to push it into the top 50 luxury brands in the world. I wanted to turn a black hole into a crown. Julian said he trusted me, but I could see it deep down he still worried the rot inside that division would swallow me whole. For the first time, he stopped going to the monastery, stopped the philosophy talks with monks, and started following me, like he was afraid I'd get stabbed in the back, or afraid I'd walk straight into the fire and not know how to get out. But the moment he stepped into the company with me, Julian understood something fast. I wasn't the kind of woman anyone could bully. On day 1, I called an all-staff meeting. I looked at the list, looked at the resumes, looked at all those fake smiles. Then I fired 2/3 of them, without blinking. Most of them were there to cash in, live off connections, treat the company like a pie to slice up. And the worst part? They strangled new talent, chased the good people out, and kept the parasites because parasites were easier to control. They screamed. They banded together and filed complaints up the chain, thinking they could use tradition and relationships to pressure me into backing down. Julian was the one who rejected every complaint. With one sentence. My wife's decision. By afternoon, They all shut up and handed in resignations, like rats that smelled smoke. After that, I went straight to the top art schools. I didn't hire big names. I hired people with teeth. I met with professors and asked for a list of their best students, people with real skill, real minds. I invited them in weekly, paid them properly, gave them opportunities the industry would never give students under normal circumstances. Then I launched theme design competitions. First prize, $300,000. Second prize, $200,000. Third prize, $100,000. Winners got signed on the spot. It was the kind of push every student dreams about: money, experience, and a real position before graduation. Competition exploded. Young talent fought so hard the testing rooms felt like war zones. They grabbed at the chance. I grabbed at the future. I got high-quality designs at a fraction of the cost of hiring stars, and they got a door straight into the industry. At the same time, I launched a digital marketing campaign. Not empty ads. A story. The brand's rebirth. From failure, to restructuring, to boldness. I built curiosity, built controversy, built anticipation, and then I opened with a fashion launch event. I sent invites to exactly the right people: industry leaders, celebrities, sharp investors, fashion media, and influencers who could turn a bag into a global obsession with a single photo. Nobody dared to refuse a Whitmore Holdings invitation. They showed up thinking, fine, we'll make an appearance. But when the stage lights came up, the entire room went silent. My collection was so beautiful people forgot to sip their drinks. The cuts were razor clean. The materials were daring. The tones and structure felt like they were measured by someone who knew exactly what the market would be starving for 3 years from now. By the end of the show, every single display piece was pre-ordered on the spot. Major orders got signed immediately. The entire collection sold out that night. A decade of losses got wiped out with one clean turn. The next day, the major fashion magazines ran the headline: Whitmore Fashion is back. And people started saying my name without attaching the word daughter-in-law. They started attaching another word instead: legend. Meanwhile, I didn't forget Claire. The hotel and jewelry division she ran looked shiny on the outside, but inside they were filthy as a sewer. I only had to hit the right pressure point. A wave of videos went viral, staff wiping toilets with towels, then folding them like nothing happened. Then came accusations of copied jewelry designs, side-by-side comparisons so obvious it felt like a slap across the face. Claire got hit exactly where she feared most: public humiliation. She dumped money on the fire like it was water, hired PR teams, hired lawyers, paid for articles, scrubbed traces, but it was too late. Because once something's online, it doesn't belong to you anymore. People started seeing the real Claire, someone addicted to playing perfect, with nothing solid underneath. Then came Grandpa Whitmore's birthday. A small family gathering, just a few tables of close relatives. In past years, Damon was always the star praised, coddled, lifted up like gold. This time, I walked in with my arm linked through Julian's. The entire room shifted. The same people who used to treat Julian like a shadow now stood up, raised glasses, said his name, complimented him, poured his drink, smiled like they'd always loved him. I got it. It was all fake. A cheap performance because Julian had value now, because I was behind him, because my win was armor on his shoulders. But for Julian, a man who'd never been recognized like that in his life, it was a milestone. And I saw it clearer than anyone. That night, for the first time, he drank in front of other people. Not much, but enough to make his cold eyes darker, deeper. When we got home, the room was washed in dim light, the scent of alcohol mixed with tea. Julian stood in front of me, looking at me like something he tried to avoid. Only the more he avoided it, the more it pulled him in. Then he stepped closer. He wasn't that distant statue anymore. Not that above worldly desires man. His eyes were stained with hunger, the muscles under his shirt tightening as he unbuttoned his cuffs, each movement slow, steady, like he'd been holding himself back for too long. His voice went rough, almost like a confession. Grace. He touched me like he was touching something that belonged to him, wanting to claim me, and at the same time afraid he might break me. And I realized it all at once. What I changed wasn't just a fashion division. I changed Julian. I'd pulled him out of the shadow behind his brother. I'd placed him under the lights, and for the first time in his life, he let himself want something. He wanted me. I wasn't some naive girl who would look at a man half sober, half drunk like Julian and choose to step back. That night, it wasn't him conquering me. It was me allowing him through the last door I had. A door I'd kept locked for a long time, not out of fear, but because I'd always known. The most dangerous thing about powerful men isn't money. It's hunger. Once they taste it, they stop knowing what enough means. Julian had lived like a monk in Manhattan, quiet, restrained, always outside the game. But after that night he was like someone who'd woken up. He clung to me in a way that wasn't loud, but couldn't be refused. A brush of fingers in the hallway. A short call at noon just to ask where I was. Swinging by my office, standing behind me for a few seconds like he needed to confirm I was real. And he got more generous. Not the kind of generosity that throws gifts to keep you quiet. The kind that hands you power. First it was jewelry and real estate out of habit, things that made people gasp, but didn't move me anymore. Then one night, Julian set a thin folder in front of me, his signature neat and calm, his voice as casual as the weather. I'm transferring 5% of the shares to you. 5%. It sounded small, but with Whitmore Holdings, it meant tens of millions a year in dividends. And more importantly, it bought me a seat on the board. A seat meant a voice. A seat meant I wasn't Julian's wife in every meeting anymore. I was someone who could raise her hand and decide. I took the folder, flipped to the last page, looked at his signature, then lifted my eyes. You're not afraid I'll use this to bite your family back? Julian just tilted his mouth. If you wanted to bite, he said, you would have bitten a long time ago. I understood. This wasn't a gift. It was acknowledgement. And it was also the most beautiful leash he could have placed on his own neck, proof to the whole family that he chose me. And that choice had value. While I gained shares and a board seat, Claire got nothing but stale headlines and PR that was already losing its shine. After a string of business failures, she got pulled from key roles and reassigned to smaller projects, polished enough to save face, meaningless enough to keep her from building power. Retirement wrapped in the word trust. Every time we crossed paths in the Midtown headquarters hallway, Claire's eyes stabbed at me like needles. Bitter. Jealous. Helpless. But with Julian showing up beside me so often, she didn't dare start a scene in front of him. So Claire did what she always did best. She hit from the shadows. My phone buzzed. A video call request. I accepted. Claire's face filled the screen, makeup perfect, but her voice low and smoky, like she'd been swallowing ash. Congratulations, she said, each word ground out through her teeth. Everyone praises you. Says you're brilliant. Says you're amazing. I smiled lightly, calm enough to feel cold even to myself. Why shouldn't I be good? I shot back. A brand people laughed at for 10 years turns into a phenomenon overnight. I take over and I'm on magazine covers, called the new star. What's the problem? Claire's face flushed red. You just got lucky, she hissed. If I had that project, I'd do better. And even if you succeed, so what? Damon is the heir. I'm the legal Mrs. Whitmore. Your dividends and your husband still have to go through us. When Damon takes the company, the first thing I do is kick you out. Just wait. I leaned back, eyes lazy. Kick me out, I repeated, like she'd told me a joke. How exactly are you planning to do that? I let a few seconds of silence pass, then spoke slowly, like placing chess pieces. I own 5%. I looked straight into the camera. My smile wasn't sweet anymore. You should pray Damon stays a party boy forever. Because if one day he's forced to actually grow up, I tilted my head. Whitmore Holdings might end up with a new owner. I hung up and left Claire boiling on the other side because this wasn't a threat she could bury with PR. She couldn't buy it with money. She couldn't cover it with tears. From that moment on, Claire became obsessed with turning Damon into a real heir. She pushed him to work, forced him into meetings, made him sign projects, made him prove himself, tried to force him to become Julian. But Damon wasn't born to grind. He was born to indulge. The tighter Claire squeezed, the more Damon hated her. And just like I predicted, at the next family gathering, Damon's mask slipped right at the dinner table. Inside the family mansion's elegant dining room, Everyone ate and talked investments like they were discussing the weather. Claire sat beside Damon, her hand on his like a brand. She couldn't stand seeing Grandpa praise Julian and me a few times, so she started again. "You need to do more," Claire said. "Look, Julian." She didn't even finish before Damon set his knife down. Metal clicked against the plate cold as ice. "Shut up," Damon said, sharp and contemptuous. "Can you just shut up?" The whole table went dead silent. Claire froze like someone dumped ice water over her. Damon let out a short laugh. "Every day you compare me to Julian. If you think he's so great, why didn't you marry him?" He leaned in, voice turning nastier. "And you have the nerve to criticize me? If you had even half the brain my sister-in-law has, you wouldn't have made the hotel and jewelry division stink like this." He exhaled, and the final line dropped like a hammer. "Marrying you was the worst luck of my life." The air died. Claire looked around at all the eyes on her relatives she'd bought with parties and gifts, now silent like they were watching a good show. Her face burned red. Her voice shook with rage. "I do everything for you," she cried, slipping right into victim mode. "You're the oldest son. You have responsibilities. And the hotel mess isn't just my fault. I asked you for help, but you're always busy." Same old performance. But unfortunately for Claire, Damon grew up surrounded by every kind of woman, every kind of manipulation. He'd seen it. He was sick of it. "Oh, stop," Damon snapped, his face twisting with disgust. "I'm done with that act." He stood up and walked out, leaving Claire sitting there, humiliated, drowning in whispers and judgmental stares. I wasn't finished. That night, I picked up my phone and called the right person. I didn't need to make anything up. I only needed to place the truth in the right spot. Damon's real lover showed up at a private club in Miami where the rich treat secrets like jewelry. Her name was Arya, a famous Thai transgender woman, beautiful in a way that made people afraid to stare too long in case it exposed what they wanted. Arya wasn't crude or loud. She was elegant, silent at the right moments, smiling on cue, making men feel like they were understood. Damon loved that. I sent Claire an anonymous message. Just a blurry video clear enough to recognize Damon and an address, the private room number, the time. No extra words. Half an hour later, Claire stormed into the club. Not alone. She brought a pack of friends, women who were always ready to defend her honor, because they loved drama more than justice. But this time, Damon didn't react the way he usually did. Before, whenever Claire caught Damon with someone else, Damon would let her scream, even let her slap him, let her chase the mistress away. He let her feel powerful, because it was cheap and fast. But this time, Damon stepped in front of Arya. He didn't let Claire touch her. He turned to Claire, eyes cold as stone, like he was looking at someone embarrassing him in front of his friends. "Enough," Damon said. Claire couldn't believe it. Like she'd been betrayed twice in the same second. She lunged, and Damon hit her back. Not once, twice. The sound cracked through the private room, and Claire's friends went frozen silent. Claire locked up for a second, then screamed and threw herself at Damon like a storm. I don't need to describe every detail. You only need to know the night ended with security sirens, with chaos scrubbed away like a stain from an expensive carpet. Claire was taken to the hospital, and the funniest part was, even lying in a VIP room full of luxury flowers and fruit baskets, Claire still thought she was winning. The family came to visit, comforted her, called her the victim, blamed Damon for going too far. They demanded Damon apologize. Damon was drunk, and his poisonous mouth didn't know when to stop. "She deserved it," Damon snapped, loud enough to echo down the hallway. "Every day she causes problems and tries to control me in real life too. She doesn't know her place." Grandpa exploded and slapped Damon right there. "You useless bastard," he said. "If you keep this up, you're not my son." That slap sobered Damon up faster than any antidote, because Damon only had one dream in life: to inherit, to live on money without anyone tightening a leash around his neck. He immediately lowered his head, apologized frantically, swore it would never happen again, promised to make it up to her. To prove his sincerity, Damon promised to give Claire a private estate worth over $60 million. The moment she heard the number, Claire's eyes softened. Her anger vanished like bruises could be exchanged for real estate. She switched her tone, grabbed Damon's hand, played the wife who loved too hard, and they hugged and made up right in front of the relatives. One cruel man and one stupid woman made for each other. As everyone filed out, Claire deliberately asked me to stay. She lay in the hospital bed, her face pale, but her smile arrogant like she was already posing for headlines. Sisters fight. Couples fight. It's normal, Claire said, voice dripping with contempt. If you don't fight, is it even love? Don't let how I look fool you. It's not that serious. I just need a few days. She looked up, eyes sparkling with self-satisfaction. Besides, after this, everyone sees how devoted I am. Damon feels guilty, and I get a new estate. So in the end, I still win. I stared at her for a moment, then laughed. Claire, I said softly, you're really economical. She frowned. My smile deepened. Each word fell slow. You traded half your life for a price tag. One estate is enough to make you feel satisfied, and you still call that winning. Claire lifted her mouth, still above it all. You don't get it, she said. Not like your husband. My husband, she emphasized it, comes home every night. I glanced toward the hospital door, where hallway reflections moved like shadows. Then I looked back and smiled gently. Yeah, I said. Every night. I didn't say the rest. That some men come home every night because they love you, and some men come home every night because they don't want to lose their inheritance. But Claire would understand soon. Because in this game, she'd already placed herself in position. A position where all it would take was one small push from me, and she'd fall. And this time, nobody would reach out to catch her. Claire smiled like a queen, like the bandages on her body were just accessories to make her look more tragic. You won't understand, she said again, voice lazy with pride. Not like me. My husband comes home every night. I gave a short, cold laugh, my eyes sliding over her face, then down to her bandaged wrist and the bruises that hadn't even faded yet. You're basically living like a widow, I said, calm to the point of cruelty. What's the point of a husband if he shows up like a paid bill? At least you get a husband beside you. I stressed that word and tilted my head. But are you sure he's clean? Claire froze. Her smile turned waxy. I kept going, my voice steady like I was mentioning a small detail in a financial report. Damon has a very specific taste, and he's not picky about partners. If you get what I'm saying. I looked straight into her eyes. Go get tested for STDs. Just to be safe. Claire went pale. Her lips trembled. No way, she stammered, trying to hold on to her pride. He wouldn't do that to me. But even as she denied it, her hand had already slammed the nurse call button so fast she couldn't even hide it. Claire had been so obsessed with getting pregnant to lock in the Mrs. Whitmore title that she forgot the most basic thing. The things that ruin a life don't always come from enemies. Sometimes they come from your own carelessness. I stood up, straightened my sleeve, my voice light as wind. Good luck. I left the hospital at an unhurried pace. And that same night, the dominoes started to fall. I'm not someone who loves noise. But some things, if you want to bury them, you have to bury the whole sky. Damon had lived too long under the illusion that money could buy silence. I anonymously dropped videos online just enough to understand. Nothing explicit. No graphic detail. Only enough to show the chaos of Damon's private life. Enough to show the inhuman way he treated people. Enough for the public to fill in the rest with their own imagination. Right timing. Right rhythm. The internet exploded. Overnight, Damon Whitmore went from rich heir to a symbol of rot. Hashtags hit #1. Think pieces flooded in. Furious comments rose like a tide. And the best part, like a cold nail driven straight into Claire's heart. The test results came back. Claire wasn't pregnant, but she did test positive for a few things. Things that would stay on her medical record, wouldn't clear up quickly, and would mean waiting at least a few years before it would be safe to try for a baby. I didn't need to be there to see her face when she heard. Just imagining it was enough to taste the bitterness. At the same time, the fallout hit Whitmore Holdings head-on. The stock plunged off a cliff, wiping out hundreds of millions in market cap. Investors who only cared about profit started calling it a crisis of confidence. Partners demanded explanations. The press swarmed. The board was forced into an emergency meeting. Damon still held a major title. Vice chairman. heir apparent. But in that room, nobody used a flattering tone with him anymore. Only cold stares. Only questions that cut like knives. In the end, Damon was forced to resign to minimize damage, a polite sentence that really meant they dragged him out as a sacrifice. But I wasn't done. I kept dropping pieces. Not about Damon this time. About his closest friends, the ones who always clapped for him, always pulled him into private rooms that reeked of alcohol and power, always laughed when other people got hurt. One by one, old scandals got dragged back into the light, drug-filled parties, abuse of power, filthy stories that used to disappear with enough money. This time, they didn't disappear. The police got involved. Inspections, subpoenas, black SUVs parked outside exclusive clubs, faces that once smiled like kings landed on the front page in the one way they never wanted. Damon got called in too. His results might have come back clean on paper, but it didn't matter anymore. Because the public had already decided. No one believed him. No one wanted to believe him. Damon's reputation got ground into dust. And in the Whitmore family, reputation was money. It was power. It was a passport to keep your inheritance. When that passport gets ripped up, ownership changes hands. With Damon collapsing, his shares and authority were pulled under the Trust Council's internal rules and transferred to the one person still safe enough to keep the company standing, Julian. The news hit on an afternoon when I was home, sipping tea. Julian sat across from me, calm as always, a new string of wooden beads in his hands. He was carving each bead into a lotus shape, careful, precise. Sunlight spilled over his long fingers, and I could see tiny cuts all over them, like proof of a frightening kind of patience. My phone buzzed. An internal notice from the council. One step. In a single blink, Julian went from the second son, the shadow, to the only heir. I looked at Julian. There was no bright celebration in his eyes, the way Claire would have had. Only deep silence, like he was staring straight at a mountain that had just crashed down in front of him. As a teenager, Julian had wanted to prove himself. Wanted one nod from his parents, the kind they always saved for Damon. But time broke that dream. He withdrew into meditation, using indifference to cover wounds no one ever bothered to name. But once power was placed in his hands, he couldn't refuse it. And more importantly, he didn't want to refuse anymore. A few days later, Julian was appointed CEO of Whitmore Holdings. And me, I was appointed vice chair. Not a figurehead. Not a title. A real seat with real signing authority, real decision power, control over the hottest sectors on the market. For the first time in this life, I wasn't just inside the game. I was above it. My name entered the circle of the most powerful women in America. Wealth, influence, connections, everything multiplied overnight. I became something Claire couldn't dismiss as getting lucky anymore. Because luck doesn't repeat itself with the precision of a plan. Claire was discharged. And she didn't waste a single minute. She stormed into my office at headquarters, the door flying open so hard my assistant jumped up. The face that used to look so polished was now hollow, her eyes red, dark circles bruised under them like ink stains. Her right hand was bandaged. She looked like someone who'd crawled out of a war, and still believed she was a queen. She didn't greet me. She didn't play nice. She came at me like a bullet. "Grace," Claire screamed. "You shameless piece of trash. How dare you steal my husband's company? I'm warning you. Give everything back to Damon right now. Or else." I hadn't even looked up yet, when a voice, cold as steel, cut in from the doorway. "Are you threatening my wife?" Claire jerked like she'd been shocked. Her whole body went stiff. She turned, and the second she saw Julian standing there, ice ran straight down her spine. The memories from the last life surged back so vivid she could almost hear mala beads clicking together in the dark. Claire swallowed hard, forced out a smile. "You misunderstood, Julian," she stammered, her voice turning pathetic and soft. "I was just joking with my sister. That's how we talk. Habit. She's my real sister, I love her." Julian gave a short, dismissive breath, his gaze slicing through her makeup like a blade. "You'd better hope that's true." Then he walked over to me. Without sparing Claire another look, Julian pulled a small wooden box from his pocket and opened it. Inside was a lotus seed bracelet, each bead carved sharply and beautifully, like an offering. He took my hand and slid it onto my wrist. His voice dropped, strangely gentle. Grace, he said. I brought it to the monastery for a blessing. They said it's protected now. His fingers brushed my skin light. It'll keep you safe. I saw the tiny cuts on his hands. I saw the patience and stubbornness behind every carved line. His amber eyes were warmer than usual. Like he wasn't just giving me a gift. He was making a statement. That I belonged to him. That anyone who touched me was touching power. That the door behind me was locked. Claire stood there, watching it like she was staring at the wrong version of a dream. Her pupils tightened. Confusion turned to suspicion, then flared into boiling jealousy. In the last life, Claire had wanted warmth from Julian, something she never got. All she got was coldness, punishment, and being thrown straight into hell. And now Julian was gentle with me. Claire bit her lip until it bled, forcing herself to stay composed. She shot me one last look, pure hatred, like she wanted to carve my name into the wall, then spun and walked out. I watched her go. I knew what she'd come for. Not just to scream. To measure how strong I was. To measure how deep Julian stood on my side. And most importantly, to see if she still had any way left to flip the board. I lowered my eyes to the lotus bracelet on my wrist, cool on the surface, fire underneath. I smiled. Go ahead and make your plans, Claire. This time, there won't be a balcony high enough to push me off. I knew Claire would come for revenge. Not with words. Not with petty posts. The kind of revenge that comes from someone who's tasted killing and believes it's her right. In the last life, she pushed me off a building. This time, with everything slipping through her fingers, Damon collapsing. Mrs. Whitmore turning into a joke. The only thing Claire had left to cling to was one thought. If I disappeared, the world would give her place back. And Damon? He fell so hard it was almost funny. The louder his old life had been, the colder his current life became. Before, he only had to show up and people raised glasses, kissed his ass, called him future CEO. Now nobody answered his calls. Nobody invited him. Nobody wanted to sit at his table. And instead of looking at himself, Damon dumped it all on Claire. In his head, if Claire hadn't stormed into the club that night, if she hadn't made a scene, if she hadn't turned his game into a scandal, then he wouldn't have been filmed, wouldn't have been sacrificed, wouldn't have lost everything. Alcohol and rage turned Damon into something else. Something darker than simple decay. He started taking it out on Claire like she owed him his life back. I won't describe it. I don't need to. Just know that every time Claire showed up at the hospital after that, even disinfectant couldn't cover the smell of despair. Bruises hidden under long sleeves. Injuries explained away with, I fell. I hired a private investigator not out of curiosity, but because I wanted a file. Proof of violence, proof of money disappearing. Proof of the financial tricks Damon used to keep himself safe. I planned to stack it all up and bury him in court for good. But before I could move, Claire came to me on her own. She even brought coffee. And she chose the location on purpose. A rooftop. Just like last time, I agreed without hesitation. Because I'd been waiting for this moment since the second I opened my eyes again. When I arrived, the wind-up that high slammed into everything, whipping Claire's red silk dress like a death flag. Her skin was marked with damage time couldn't erase, bruises, dark stains, ugly little burns. The face that used to look arrogant had thinned out, but her eyes still had that familiar, crazy light. Claire turned toward me. Her mouth curved, warped into a smile like a crack in glass. Grace, she whispered. You really are easy to fool. I tilted my head like I didn't understand. What do you mean? Claire moved toward me slowly, each step careful like an injured animal that still had teeth. Do you believe in past lives? She asked, voice dripping with mockery. You don't have to. Because I do. She looked toward the edge of the rooftop, then back at me, her eyes lighting up with dark pleasure. In the last life you died by my hand. I didn't answer. I just watched her. Letting her finish like letting a criminal read her own confession out loud. This is the 27th floor, Claire murmured, like she was picking something off a menu. If you fall, there won't be anything pretty left. Just a horrifying ending. Her hand clenched, and I caught the cold flash of metal at her waist. A knife. At first I wanted Damon to do it, Claire said, her voice sweet like poisoned honey. But you made Julian take your side. Fine. She moved closer. I can end it myself. The blade pressed against my dress. Claire's smile stretched wider. Her eyes wild like she was watching a movie she directed. Any last words? She whispered. If I'm in a good mood, I'll give you one final wish. I let out a small laugh. Sure, I said. Then let me tell you a secret. Claire narrowed her eyes. What secret? I leaned in, lowered my voice. Like I was sharing something intimate. I always knew Damon was trash, I said. I knew he'd fall. I knew he'd drag you down with him. I paused just long enough to watch her pupils tighten. Then I said the part that turned her into stone. Because my dear sister. I smiled. I came back too. Claire's face went dead white. But that's not even the best part. I continued, still calm. The reason I came here tonight isn't to die. I lifted my gaze to a small security camera mounted near the rooftop door. A tiny red light blinking. It's to get you arrested. Claire yanked her hand in panic. The blade scraped, ripping my dress and leaving a burning line across my skin. She lunged, trying to shove me toward the edge. But at that exact second, the rooftop door blew open. Boots thundered. Police! Someone shouted. Armed officers flooded in, guns raised, eyes locked on the knife in Claire's hand. Claire froze. Her whole body shook. I stepped back, out of her reach, and lowered my head with a smile only Claire could hear. You really thought I'd let you kill me that easily? I whispered. That would be way too kind. That was when Claire finally understood. She'd walked straight into my trap. She screamed, trying to grab me and drag me down with her like the last life. But the police were faster. One hard move. The knife clattered to the ground. Claire was slammed down, cuffed cold metal snapping shut like a coffin latch. I crouched beside her and looked into her eyes as they cracked with panic. Congratulations, Claire, I said softly. You just confessed on camera. The sentence wasn't light. Attempted murder. Assault with a deadly weapon. And with clear evidence, a clear confession, a clear motive. Claire had no way out. 15 years. Long enough to break an arrogant woman. Long enough for someone who used beauty and status as weapons to learn what it feels like to have no weapons at all. As for Damon, his fate was already sealed. I turned the entire file over to my lawyers and investigators. Charges stacked like chains. Domestic violence, financial fraud, dirty deals hidden under layers of protection. I didn't have to invent anything. Damon had left footprints everywhere. People just hadn't dared to look before. A long sentence. A prison door closing. And this time, no amount of money could buy the key. The day the news went public, I was home with tea in one hand, turning the lotus bracelet Julian carved in the other. Sunlight hit the wood, making the carving lines rise like a mark of fate. Julian stood behind me, voice low. It's done. But I knew. It wasn't done. Because there was still one last thing to claim. The top. A few days later, Julian called an emergency shareholder meeting. The Manhattan boardroom was silent. The faces that used to bow to Damon now sat upright, watching Julian with cautious eyes. Everyone understood. Whitmore Holdings had just survived an earthquake, and the new driver would decide whether the company resurrected or slowly died. Julian stepped forward. No speeches. Starting today, I'm stepping back from direct operations, he said, calm enough to chill the room. I'll keep a representative role for the family. The room stirred. Julian lifted a hand, brushing the noise down like dust. Then he said the line that stole everyone's breath. The real operator of Whitmore Holdings, Julian said, looking straight at the room, will be Grace. Silence. Then Julian continued, voice firm as iron. Grace is more capable than any vice chair this company has ever had. Only under her leadership will we go beyond our old limits. Never say women are weaker than men. Never say women can't carry responsibility. His eyes swept the room like stamping every face. I can say this confidently. No one here, Julian paused, including me, is more suited than she is. Then one more sentence. Like a hammer. Remember this, we need her as CEO. She doesn't need us. Julian stepped aside and opened the door himself. Invited me in. One by one, the board members stood. No more contempt. No more sneers. They lowered their heads, bowing to power that had finally taken shape. Good afternoon, Madam Chair. I walked to the head of the table, sat down, set my tea beside the folder, smiled. Let's begin. Later, people would call that era a renaissance. Under my hand, Whitmore Holdings didn't just regain trust, it surpassed its old glory. Every sector I targeted surged. Every deal I signed became a case study in MBA classrooms. My name hit every power ranking not as someone's wife, but as a woman who built an empire with her own hands. Julian kept his promise. He stayed behind me, quiet, only appearing when he needed to send a warning. But behind closed doors, he wasn't distant anymore. Day by day, he grew more possessive in a way that was silent, deep like an addict clinging to the one thing that made him feel alive. And Claire, prison ground her into a shadow, the woman who once stood under chandeliers, who called herself the real Mrs. Whitmore, vanished from the world like a story nobody wanted to repeat. When her time was up, she stepped out into camera flashes and hungry stares. But she didn't get far. That night, Claire disappeared. No trace. Rumors spread. Some said she ran. Some said someone helped her vanish. I didn't care. Because to me, Claire died the moment she lifted that knife on the rooftop. Her death just took long enough for her to understand fear. And Damon? Years later, people said he didn't survive his full sentence. No one knew the details. And no one asked. No sympathy. No flowers. No tears. Only the silence of a name erased from the guest list. One night, as I stood by my penthouse window watching Manhattan glitter like a sea of stars, Julian came up behind me. His amber eyes locked onto mine, his voice dropping soft and dangerous at once. "Grace," he murmured, fingers brushing the lotus bracelet on my wrist. "Now you have everything. Power, money, respect." He leaned closer, his breath right there. "Tell me," Julian asked. "What's next?" I smiled. Slowly, like someone who'd walked through hell and learned how to hold fire with bare hands. "What's next," I said, "is keeping all of it." I turned to face him. "And making sure," I whispered, "no one can ever take it from me again."